The Thing Residing in the Woods. Part 5. Let's get straight into that. Coming in with another post. How you doing? I had a pretty interesting week. I just returned from a CR Sasquatch hunt and I'm ready to write about some of my hunting stories. I'll focus on beast hunts in this post. However, unlike what the title says, most of these hunts won't be some of my first hunts. They would just be the first that I talk about. Now, before I start with the stories, I want to clear some things I've forgotten to mention in the last post. I had to change my name because my original one was written on a file that said that I was dead. And so, to stay in the spirit, I changed my name in these posts. From now on, you'll know me as Damien Everwood. I also need to explain one more thing. Now, as I mentioned, Alex, Jamie, Lilith, and I consider to be a team or Operational Unit 506. There are operational units from 101 to 110, 201 to 210, 301 to 310, and 401 to 410, and 501 to 509. There is one other member actually, and her name is Clarissa, and she handles our duties and recruits us for jobs. She will explain the situation before we set out to hunt. She also tells us which cryptid is suspected to be responsible for incidents so that we could prepare and plan how to hunt in advance. Our Equilibrium is trying to recruit even more hunters because the number of cryptids has been rising in the past few months. Their abilities are getting stronger as well, and they are starting to cause much more chaos and death. There's also something weird going on with their appearance. They are larger, stronger, faster. Their skin turned darker and their veins pumped so much blood that it could be seen through their dark skin. This doesn't happen to every single one of them, only some, and therefore they're higher up suspected to be some kind of disease or something similar. Yes, you read that right, they suspect. They still don't know what's making this happen, because as soon as one of those powered up cryptids is killed, it turned back into the normal form. This means that something caused them to change their appearance as well as strengthen their abilities. Equilibrium gave orders to hunters to capture those things, but they're too aggressive, giving you only two options: kill or be killed, and we all know what hunters will choose. And we had too many casualties from these things already, and so we need to find out what's causing them to turn quickly. Well, if you ask me, I think that this is connected to the CR Phantom. The thing mentioned something about the one that will come to conquer. Maybe the so-called one is trying to gather and power up cryptids and fight humans with a cryptid army. Anyway, now that I told you what's going on with cryptids and Equilibrium, I'll start with the hunting stories that I promised. Just to remind you what my equipment is, I have a brown overcoat which is required to be worn by every hunter. Under it, I wear chainmail, I usually cover with a shirt. On my back, I carry my main weapon, a two-handed sword. There's a small crossbow attached to my left arm which I can use to slow down or disorientate, but not kill cryptids. It just isn't powerful enough to kill them. If I ever get pounced on or pinned in a position, I wouldn't be able to use my sword or crossbow, and so I carry a hunting knife on my left hip. The sword, the knife, and the tips of the arrows are made of a special alloy that is insanely hard and allows these weapons to stay extremely sharp. Now that I have reminded you of my equipment, let's just jump into the hunt. I'll start with the CR Sasquatch hunt I just returned from. As I wrote in my previous post, CR Sasquatches are ape-like humanoid creatures that are 8 feet tall and have brown fur and are very aggressive. They live in the mountainy areas, mostly throughout North America. However, it is not unheard for people to find them in Asia and Australia. They usually feed on meat but have been observed eating some berries and fruit, and instead of stalking their prey, they attack it as soon as they notice it. When you shine your light on their faces, they glow light yellow, as they are nocturnal. They live in caves and, just like bears, hibernate during the winter because there's not enough prey around. They have been caught trying to get into people's houses to hunt them down. They also snatch people that walk on paths near forests and drag them into their caves where they eat them. Clarissa showed me a case, 2 people missing. A father and a son went camping, a week before she showed me the case. People that lived in a town near the place where the duo camped spoke of a dark figure walking through the woods. They claimed to have found large humanoid footprints as well as carcasses of deer and other forest animals, and with bite marks much larger than that of a bear. There were very large marks of canines from both sides, and some of their bones were broken from multiple strong impacts. There was even a corpse of a wolf found. Something left it on the front porch of someone's cabin. This one is kind of suspicious. The rest of the evidence pointed out to be CR Bigfoot or CR Sasquatch, but they aren't smart enough to leave a corpse to scar or lure people. I gathered my equipment and set out on the hunt. I arrived in town in the early morning. Clarissa paid for a room in a motel on the edge of the forest. It was about 5 minutes away from the town, and for the first day I chose to gather some more information. Equilibrium told us what our alibi should be. We're supposed to introduce ourselves as Cryptid hunters. This may confuse you because of how secretive the organization is. However, we aren't allowed to tell of the organization. We should say that we are hired by someone after they found us on some site. We are supposed to say that we're self-taught and self-trained hunters. It's kind of similar to all those sites where you can find ghost hunters and such bullshit. Also, don't hire people like these. They'd be torn to pieces if they ever come across one of the cryptids, and would probably just anger them, resulting in even more casualties. The room I stayed in was small. There was a bed in the middle of the room, a bathroom to the left of the entrance, and a large glass door on the other side of the room. I looked into the forest. I put my equipment in a drawer that stood next to the bed and put the sword and a crossbow under the bed. I couldn't let anyone see me with it because they might call the police on me. After unpacking, I went to investigate. I walked to the town, hoping that the CR Sasquatch wouldn't attack me. I would be able to protect myself for a short time, but it wouldn't be long before the thing would maul me to death, and I'd just look like another victim of a bear attack. Fortunately, I didn't encounter it during my walk. I got to the main square in a hope to find a cafe or a bar in which I could question people about the CR Sasquatch. And before finding a place, I noticed a lot of papers on some sort of bulletin board. There were about a dozen obituaries, and I was looking at them for a minute. It's terrible, isn't it? A female voice came from my right. So many dead. I looked to my right and saw a young blonde girl that was sitting on a bike. She stopped when she saw me looking at the board. You're not from here? She asked me. No, I came to. And she cut me off before I could say anything else. Hunt down the monsters? And she chuckled. Others tried before you and all of them failed. What makes you think that you'll succeed? I know how to hunt it, I said as I took another look at the board. Can you tell me more about it? Like, when did people report seeing it for the first time, or who was its first victim? You're just like the rest. You think you are the hero, but the reality is that you'll die before you could even shoot at it. I'm not planning to shoot it, and that's a very bad way of trying to take it down, I told her. Oh, now I see. You're different than the rest. You're even crazier. So, do you know where I can find out more about it? I turned towards her and passed next to her. Or, I said looking back at her, will you leave me to do it myself? I turned around, expecting not to get an answer to the question. Wait, she shouted after me. I saw it. We sat down at a cafe not far away from where we met to talk about the monster. You said you saw it? I asked her. Yes, she said after taking in a breath and contemplating her decision to give me the information. Can you describe how it looks or what it was doing? Where you saw it? It was large and dark. It looked like a monkey, but it walked like a human. I'd say it looked like Bigfoot. At that moment, I knew it was either CR Bigfoot or CR Sasquatch, but judging by the fact that there were so many dead, I suspected it to be the CR Sasquatch. I saw it a week ago, she said. It was around 11 p.m. and I was doing something in my room. I heard footsteps of something large walking just below my window that stood on the first floor. I remember that my mother was outside, and when I looked through the window, she put a hand on her mouth and almost started crying. I saw it eating her. I'm sorry, I said, but I need to know everything so that I could prevent it from doing anything similar to anyone else. I know, she said, wiping off a few tears that were falling down her cheek. I screamed when I saw her laying there. The thing immediately looked towards me. Its mouth was coloured red and my mother's intestines were hanging from its mouth. It roared at me, dropping them and revealing its huge canines. I immediately got away from the window, but it tried to grab me. I saw its hand burst through the window, but stood far enough so that it couldn't get to me. It roared once more and I heard it running away. It left my mother's body in the garden. I called the police, but they didn't believe me. They told me that it was a hallucination and that a human was probably responsible for it. I doubt that, I replied. I'm sorry for what happened to your mother, but I needed that information. She was looking down at her coffee the entire time while telling me the story, and then she suddenly looked up at me. I'll help you take it down. Her response took me off guard. It's too dangerous. I won't let you do so. I don't care. Tears started rolling down her face once more. I need to take revenge. I stopped to think for a second. It was a huge risk of her becoming just another victim of the Sea Sasquatch's attack. But if she survives, she might become a good hunter. I mean, surviving a cryptid attack without any prior experience or education proves that you're a natural hunter. Okay, you can come, I told her. But first, you need to sleep. We'll meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the bulletin board. I'd also suggest that you say farewell to your friends because there's a large chance that you'll never see them again. I didn't want to tell her the plan to recruit her as a hunter. She most definitely wouldn't accept it willingly, but I had no choice. If I let her accompany me on the hunt and she survives, then there are only two options: to recruit her or kill her, and I have been trained to protect people, so the second option wasn't viable at all. She nodded back at me and stood up. I greeted her and went on my way to get more information. I remember she told me that others tried before me. I wanted to learn about that and concluded that I'd find out more about that in a bar. It took me about 10 minutes to find one. It was a small local bar. The interior was mostly made of old wood and had old-looking decorations. A few older men were sitting at some tables and 3 middle-aged men sitting at the bar. I sat at the bar as well, but chose to sit further away. However, far enough to hear what they were talking about. And they were grieving over another one of their friends. It'd be hard on his wife and kids. I remember hearing one of them saying, I wish him the best of luck. That's terrible, the second one said. One day you celebrate the birth of your son, the next one, you're gone. That's a cow, the first one said as he lifted his whiskey. The other two replied saying the same and lifting their whiskies before drinking. What would you like to drink? The bartender asked me. I ordered a beer and could hear the trio's glasses hitting the counter while I was talking. That's a real shame. I started looking when the bartender brought me what I ordered. All those disappearances, innocent people, went like that. Who are you? He asked me. Others came here to hunt these beasts too, but you seem, different. Is that a good sign? I asked him. We'll see. Great. I took a sip of my beer while looking at him the entire time. Who I am is not important. What is important, though, is that I learn about the incidents which occurred and are thought to be connected to the beast. After the father and the child disappeared, you probably heard of that. A search was started. They found nothing except the carcass of 2 deers that could have been killed by wolves and a tent that belonged to the duo. It wasn't torn apart and there were no tracks, if anything, around the tent. There was, however, blood on a nearby tree and people concluded that they're dead. The boy's mother hanged herself after hearing that. That's terrible. I took another sip of my beer. Indeed it is. He took a glass that stood on the bar from one of the customers that left and started cleaning it. People thought it was over. They thought it was just a very unfortunate wolf attack, and they didn't expect 17 other disappearances. Now, a week later, a trio of teens went into that forest to smoke weed or something, and were probably caught off guard by the beast. Their bodies were found when another search was started. Well, not their bodies, more like what was left of them. One was ripped clean in half. Only a head was found from another one. And the last... He stopped for a second. I took another sip and looked back at him. What did they find? I asked him when the stop lasted 10 seconds. Sir. They found him impaled on a branch through his back. Well, it came out of his stomach and forced the kid's guts to fall out. But the biggest question was, what was it doing 9 feet above the ground? Well, the bartender lowered his voice and leaned towards me so that I could hear it better. Yes, this is most definitely a CR Sasquatch. Any other beast would drag their prey to a burrow or eat them on the place entirely. They'd never leave their prey to insects and crows, but CR Sasquatch would. What about the other 6? I asked him. Well, he started. One girl watched as her mother was eaten by the thing. One couple's car broke down on a road that goes through the forest, and they were attacked. 2 others were found dead after they chose to walk through the forest for some insanely stupid and unjustifiable reason. And 6 of them said that they were cryptid hunters and went into that forest and never returned. And the last one, he stopped by the closest one of the trio that was sitting at the bar. It was Carl, he said. There was the last search. The 4 of us took a part in it, but Carl was quicker than any other person that helped us search for the bodies. He was about half a mile in front of us when we heard 3 gunshots coming from his gun and then a scream. Carl's scream. We found him torn to pieces and looking worse than he'd look if he was mauled to death by a bear. Have you seen what did that? I asked him. The beast did it. We haven't seen it, but it's out there. One of the furthest away from me replied. Why do you even care? I'm going to kill it. Well, they looked at each other and laughed. You? The one in the middle said. You're going to kill it? Yes. And what makes you think you'll succeed? I've killed ones like it before. Silence filled the room. The 3 guys were looking at me frozen, while the bartender kept looking at me, and then at them, and so on and back and forth. I'll avenge your friend, I told them. My job is to protect people, and that's why I came. Well, the guy closest to me nodded, and he went back to drinking and mourning after thanking me. I now know what's the difference between you and the rest of them, the bartender said. I looked at him waiting for an answer. The others, they did it for fame, he told me. You're doing it for the people. I talked to other people in the bar as well, but they couldn't tell me much more than the bartender. They only talked about the searches and finding the bodies. I even talked to the guy responsible for finding the bodies of the teens. However, he wasn't the one who noticed the one high up in the trees. The bodies on the floor distracted them from looking up. The first one to see the body impaled on a branch was a cop who was one of the organizers of the search. She was looking around for more evidence when she saw 2 shoes just at the top of her sight. She immediately looked up and saw the remains of the teen. I left the bar after some time and decided to return to the motel as it was getting late. I took the bus back because, it was getting dark and the night is when the CR Sasquatches go out to hunt. It took me a minute to get to the motel. Hearing about the teens made me remember John, Amanda, Jacob, and Annie. I hadn't thought of them in a long time. I could remember all the time we spent together, just like these teens, and remembered all of them dying in as terrible ways as these did. I fell asleep thinking about them. The next morning I woke up at 9 and took a quick shower. I had something to eat and started to prepare my equipment for the hunt. I had bear traps, cameras, and pieces of meat to attract the thing. I got some sort of a map of the forest which showed some paths, springs, rivers, and even a lake. While getting ready, I heard a knock on my door. At first, it irritated me, as I thought it was the hotel staff who wanted to clean the room. I'm in here, I replied. Come later. Or there was more knocking. I said, "Come back later," I said once more. "It's me?" A woman's voice came from outside. "You told me to come." Just then I realized it was already 10. I opened the door and saw the girl I'd met in the square. She wasn't alone. A guy was standing behind her. He was a bit older than the girl and he carried a gun. "Who's this?" I immediately asked her. I didn't say you could bring anyone else. "He's my half-brother. We had the same mum." And I was furious. "What were you thinking? Now he's gonna die too. That gun, I won't do shit to the beast." "Hey, don't talk to my sister like that." Her half-brother stepped in front of the girl. "You have no right to do so. And you're gonna die because of her." I raised my voice. "I see that as a perfect reason to talk like that." I turned around and sighed. My look was aimed towards the forest. I decided what we were going to do. "You'll stay here," I told the girl. "I'll give you a laptop that you can use to look at the cameras. Your brother and I will set them up during the day and we'll put traps out next to them. You'll be telling us on which camera you can see the beast and we'll try to get there as soon as possible." She was just looking at me and listening. I hoped she'd remember how I explained to her how to use them. "You'll come with me." I turned to the girl's brother and pointed my finger at his forehead. "We set the cameras throughout the forest and waited at one we'll set up in the middle. That gun, I won't do anything against the beast, so you need to use this," I said as I pulled my equipment from beneath the bed and picked the crossbow that I carry in case I need it. I tried to shoot the beast into its head. "This is going to damage it," he said sarcastically as he took the crossbow out of my hand. "We're going to set these up," I said, showing the cameras. "I need to put on my equipment and then we go." I took the chainmail and put it on. On top of it, I put a shirt and then an overcoat over it. I put my sword on my back, my small crossbow on my left arm and my dagger on my left hip. "Shit," the guy said. "Why don't I get armor?" "Because that should keep you far enough that you don't even need it," I said, pointing at the large crossbow that I gave him. It took us an entire day to set it all up and we hid in a bush near the trap in the middle. As the night was falling, we waited for the girl whose name I'd learned to be Caitlin to alert us about the whereabouts of the beast. I could sense fear building up in her brother. He was holding a crossbow as hard as he could, and he wouldn't let it go, even when we ate. When the night fell, we could barely see anything at all, but I knew our eyes would adjust soon, and if they don't, we had flashlights. Fortunately, the cameras had night vision and could turn all the way around in both directions. "Damien?" Caitlin called out about an hour after the night fell. "What is it?" "I saw movements on the..." And she stopped to read which camera it was. "On the northeast camera." It was the camera closest to our hiding place. "Can you see what it is?" I asked her and looked at her brother. He was shaking out of fear. "I can't see it at the moment. It was visible only for a second on the edge of the screen." "Wait for a second then. It might not be the beast we're looking for." There was silence for a few seconds. "Wait, I see something," she said. "It's coming from the left side." "What is it?" I asked her. "It's just a deer," she managed to say before letting out a silent scream. "There was a deer, but the beast jumped at it." "Stand up," I told her brother. "We know where it is." "I already killed it." Caitlin could be heard from the radio. I started running in the direction of the northeast camera and could hear Caitlin's brother following me. After 5 minutes, we arrived at the camera, and there it was, hunched over a deer and tearing its flesh with its large hands. As soon as he saw it, Caitlin's brother screamed and got unwanted attention from the beast. I looked at us and roared. Caitlin's brother reacted quickly and shot a crossbow dart at it. The dart hit the beast into the right side of the beast's chest, and the thing roared in pain and charged at us. I pushed Caitlin's brother out of the way and jumped to the side. The beast didn't manage to hit us. However, it did hit a tree, knocking it down. I took out my sword and started running towards the beast. It tried to swipe at me, but I rolled and dodged its attempt to hit me. When I stood up, I slashed at the thing, leaving a large wound on the back of its left arm. It swiped at me once more, and this time the hit connected with me, and made me fall to the floor. It lifted its arms and tried to hit me with them, but before it could, I managed to roll sideways and impale the creature through its left arm. I stood up and swiped at it once more, and this time it dodged as well. I swiped at it a few more times, managing to leave it with only 3 new wounds, 2 on its chest and 1 on its right arm, and this made it furious. And it roared and charged at me. It managed to hit me, and I went flying into one of the nearby trees. When I hit the tree, I could hear bones in my hip breaking, and I fell to the floor. The beast walked up to me and was about to smash me when I lifted my left arm and shot a dart from my crossbow. It hit the creature's eye, but didn't go deep enough to kill it. It roared in pain and stumbled backwards, putting its hand over its eye. It looked back at me and was about to attack me once more when it stopped and roared in pain once more. It turned around and I saw a crossbow dart in its back. I looked behind the beast and saw Caitlin's brother running away, and the beast took after him. "Idiot!" I said as soon as I realized that he was going back to the motel. I somehow managed to force myself to stand up using my sword as support and started going after them as fast as I could. This reminded me of the time I was running from the CR Phantom, because I was barely able to run that time too. And finally, I came to the clearing surrounding the motel. I immediately saw the broken window as the light from my room shined through the hole. Fortunately, no one else was staying at the place, and the owners lived further away. I slowly and quietly approached the window and could hear the crunching and tearing of flesh. When I took a peek inside, I saw the large brown figure hunched over a bed on which Caitlin's brother lay dead. His eyes were lifeless, and he wasn't moving. The crossbow I had gave him fell from his hand down onto the floor, painting it with his blood. I reloaded the small crossbow on my arm and shot a dart into the beast's back. It looked back at me and jumped. I dodged by jumping behind the wall, and the beast flew out and turned around to see me. It swiped at me and managed to hit my sword when it flew out of my hand, and my only option now was the dagger. I took it out and waited for the creature to attack me. It didn't take long. It swiped at me with its other hand, and I managed to dodge it and stab it. However, it grabbed me with its other hand and lifted me into the air. It opened its mouth and slowly started nearing my head towards them. I knew there was only one thing left that could kill the beast. I managed to free my arm, and with all the strength that I had, I hit the crossbow dart that was embedded inside the creature's eye, so hard that it went deep enough to pierce the beast's brain. The beast dropped me, roared in agony before falling to the floor and slowly dying. I fell onto my back and stopped for a second to rest. My hip hurt like hell, and the job, I was finished. And not without casualties, though. I stood up and walked to the creature. I cut its head off and took it to the room I had booked. I put it in a bag that was part of my equipment and left it in the room. Then I needed to take care of Caitlin's brother's body. I dragged it next to the beast's body and lit them both on fire. I went back into the apartment to clean the blood and gather my equipment. As soon as I entered through the window, I heard soft whimpering coming from the bathroom. I walked to the door and opened the door. Caitlin was sitting down on the floor, sobbing. She had hid from the CR Sasquatch. "It's okay," I told her, reaching towards her with my arm. "It's dead." She looked at me and slowly took my arm. I helped her get up and she hugged me. I sat her on the bed and told her that I needed to get all of the other things. "Your brother, it wasn't so lucky," I told her. "If you want to pay respect, he's there," I said, pointing to the fire. She stood up and walked out to stand in front of the fire. I called the equilibrium and ordered us to transport as well as people that will fix the window and gather the cameras. Part of my equipment is a dart gun, which is used to put people to sleep so that we can get them to the facilities. I loaded it with a dart, which is not nearly as large as those we use for crossbows. These darts look just like those that are used to put animals to sleep, except they are much stronger so they could work faster. I'm sorry I wasn't able to keep him alive," I told her as I approached her. "You warned us of it." She wiped off her tears. We didn't listen. It's our fault. I slowly and carefully lifted the gun and shot her with one of the darts. She looked at me confused and fell into my arms. And now that it was all finished, waiting was the only thing left to do. Well, the Equilibrium staff got there after 15 minutes and picked both of us up. I showed them the head of the CR Sasquatch, and they set out to cover up the incident. And both Caitlin and I were transported to UG Crimson. I haven't spoken to Caitlin since that, and I don't know how she'll react knowing that I kidnapped her. I hadn't had it best either. Because of my broken hip, I'm not supposed to go on hunts for 2 weeks, until it heals with the help of Equilibrium's medical equipment. For that reason, I can take more time to write this, making it longer than my previous posts. The next hunt I decided to write about was the CR Bigfoot hunt, which makes it kind of similar to the previous hunt, and therefore I'll keep it a bit shorter and leave the unimportant parts out. This was also one of my first professional hunts, which means one of the first hunts that I went on alone. Unlike CR Sasquatches, CR Bigfoot are much less aggressive. Some would even say that they are shy. These beasts don't attack humans unless they see them as threats or if people attack them first. They have been caught following people further away, and they always run away when they realize they are noticed. However, their presence still possesses threats to locals, and so we need to hunt them. They either live inside caves or make mixes of burrows and nests by burrowing a hole that's about 6 feet deep and cover the top of it with branches and leaves, but these types of dens are very rare. CR Bigfoot can be found only throughout the US and southern Canada, but there were reports of one in South Canada, and I was sent to deal with it. It was near a small town that stood about 20 miles away from the border with the USA. This time, I didn't need to go looking for evidence. It was a CR Bigfoot for sure. Instead of finding a motel room to stay in, I carried a tent with me and decided to sleep in the forest. It's simply not as dangerous as it is when there's a CR Sasquatch. I settled on a small clearing between a few trees and near a small stream and set out to discover the forest around me. The first day ended quickly as I arrived at the place around 6 p.m, so I went to sleep soon after setting up the camp. I woke up to the sounds of splashing coming from the stream. I immediately sat up and started unzipping the tent. When the tent was unzipped enough for me to take a peek through it, I saw the CR Bigfoot standing in the stream and looking at me. As soon as it noticed me looking at it, it bolted away. It was far too fast for me to follow it, but at least I was 100% certain it was a CR Bigfoot. I loaded my crossbow, put my sword onto my back, and set out to find the creature. And after aimlessly walking around for an hour, I came across a cottage. Someone was standing on the front porch, looking into the forest, but he couldn't see me, and he was supporting his weight with a hunting rifle. "Hey," I called after the person. As soon as my voice echoed through the forest, the person turned towards me and pointed their gun at me. When they realized I was just another person, they lowered their rifle. "Who are you?" The voice of an old man came from the cottage. "That's not important," I replied. "Why I am here is important." "You came to hunt it down," he said. "You know of it?" "Oh, I saw it multiple times. You want to come in?" I accepted his invite even though it seemed kind of sketchy. An old man with a gun living in a small cottage in a remote area where no one can hear you scream. I was trained to kill things much more dangerous than any man or woman. Now, he offered me some alcohol, but I rejected it. Drinking it, in even the smallest amounts, could be the difference between life and death. "So, how do you plan to kill it?" the old man asked me. Instead of speaking, I leaned forwards and pointed to the handle of my sword. And the old man chuckled. "A sword?" He chuckled once more. "It'd rip you apart before you could do anything. You'll need something like this," he said, picking up his rifle. Everyone makes that mistake. That thing, I won't do anything to it." He laughed out loud after I told him that. He lifted his left arm, pointed at me, and shook it up and down. "We'll see," he said. "We'll be hunting together tomorrow." I don't know why I listened to him. I agreed but decided to look around the local forest to see if I could find anything. and about half a mile away from the cottage, I found a gathering of leaves and branches. It was one of those nests Sea Owl Bigfoot sometimes make. It was collapsed, however. When they find a cave where they can settle down, they rip the formation apart and fill the hole with what its roof was previously made of. This means it'll most likely be easier to find it. Now, of course, only if the old man knew where the caves inside the forest were. After returning to the cottage, I asked him if he knew.
"There's one 1.5 miles in that direction."
He pointed towards a direction similar to where I found the formation. "You'd take me there first thing in the morning?" I said as I looked him in the eyes.
"Why?"
he asked me. "I'd probably be there." The next day we woke up at 6 a.m. We were hoping that it was already asleep. After walking for a bit less than half an hour, we arrived at the cave the old man mentioned. It was on the side of a cliff about 5 feet off the ground. A small ramp-like formation led to it. At the entrance of the cave, you could see roots sticking out from the top. And there was a small slope that led the cave deeper underground. And the cave was extremely dark. I picked my flashlight and pointed it into the cave, and I couldn't see the end of it immediately. The old man followed me with his rifle pointed in front of him. We arrived at a larger circular space. I shined my light around in hope that we'd find the Sea Owl Bigfoot. And we didn't. What we did find were carcasses or leftovers of half-eaten animals. And suddenly we heard growling coming from behind us. I turned around and my flashlight revealed glowing eyes and pointy teeth that were shown through snarling. The black fur of the wolf contrasted with its eyes. I noticed 4 more following behind. I turned off my flashlight as the old man had one attached to his rifle. I pointed the crossbow on my left arm towards the wolf and put my right arm on the handle of my sword, ready to pull it out at any second. The tension and adrenaline were at the peak. The black wolf looked behind itself and pointed its ears up. The rest of them did the same, and shortly after, we could hear footsteps of something heavy approaching the cave. And they were getting louder and louder, and I felt just like that scene from Jurassic Park. The wolves kept slowly walking towards the entrance of the cave, and then they stopped when the entrance was visible. The light from outside now shined onto their heads. However, we couldn't see anything outside. The footsteps stopped as well, and all of us stood there in silence. Suddenly, a log came flying through the entrance and hit one of the wolves. It shattered its head into pieces and its entire body completely broke. The rest of the wolves started barking and growling, and there was a roar from outside the cave. The Sea Owl Bigfoot ran in and hit one of the wolves with its arm and dislocated its jaw completely. The wolf started spitting out blood and saliva before falling to the floor, dead, while the Sea Owl Bigfoot spread its arms and pumped its chest, trying to intimidate the wolves that remained, and it roared once more. Even if the wolves were intimidated, they had no choice. They could either attack it or run towards a dead end. One of them charged at the Sea Owl Bigfoot and tried to bite it, but the creature grabbed the wolf and pushed its head into the ground, breaking it into 1,000 pieces. One of the 2 remaining wolves managed to bite the beast's left arm, but it pulled it off with its other arm. It lifted the wolf over its head and threw it into the floor with full force, breaking its spine. The thing was still alive and yelped out of pain. The Sea Owl Bigfoot stomped onto the wolf's neck and stomped until it stopped its suffering. The last wolf contemplated attacking the Sea Owl Bigfoot, but it still did. It jumped onto the beast, and the beast managed to grab the wolf's top jaw with one hand and the wolf's lower jaw with the other arm. It started spreading its arms and completely tore the wolf's jaw apart. The beast pulled so hard that the wolf's entire head and neck separated in 2. And the only ones left alive were the old man, Sea Owl Bigfoot, and me. I knew what was about to happen. The old man pointed his rifle at the beast and shot at it. The bullet hit, but it didn't pierce its skin. It damaged it a little. The beast looked at the old man and me, and then charged. I managed to dodge by rolling to one side, but the old man, I wasn't so lucky. The beast grabbed him by one leg and one arm and tore him in 2 pieces. Half his torso was connected to his head and the arm the beast was holding, while the rest of his body was connected to the leg the beast was still holding in its other hand. Organs started falling from both parts. I decided to run outside so that I could see better while fighting this thing. It turned towards me, roared, and started running at me. I stopped, turned around, and aimed at the sea Bigfoot's leg. I shot at it, and the dart pierced the beast just below the knee. It collapsed to the floor and rolled before standing back up, and it charged at me once more. I reloaded the crossbow, and when it was closer, I shot at its shoulder. I'd slowed the beast down, but because of how close it was, it didn't do much. As its shoulder was pushed back, it used that momentum to swipe at me. I crouched to dodge and pulled my sword out, and with one hand I grabbed it by the handle, and with the other one I grabbed it by the middle of the blade. I pushed the top of the blade below the beast's ribs and pulled it out. I left a deep wound. The sea Bigfoot grabbed me with its other arm and threw me 10 feet away. I stopped myself by piercing the ground with a sword and looked back at the creature. It was looking at its wound, and I was the one to charge this time. The sea Bigfoot noticed me and decided to do the same thing. It tried to hit me once more, but I dodged it by jumping to the side. It quickly swiped with its other arm and took me off guard. Its arm connected with my chest, and I fell to the floor. The creature stood there towering over me. It went to grab me with one of its hands, but I swung my sword, cutting off half of its fist. Only its thumb and index finger were left. It roared, grabbing that hand with the other one. I took that opportunity to pierce its leg with my sword. It roared once more, and as I pulled the sword out, it fell to its knees. I stood up and lifted my sword. I swung it at the creature, but it managed to catch it with its already wounded arm. My sword cut through its flesh with ease and cut its arm in half to its elbow. Its blood started spraying all over me, and because of how big the creature was, its stomach was about the same level as mine. And after pulling my sword out of its arm smoothly but quickly, I swung it once more and hit the beast's stomach horizontally. I pulled it to the side, leaving the beast with a wound so wide and deep that its guts started falling out. The beast tried to keep them from falling out by its arms, but it didn't do much. I put the sword up behind the creature's head and swung it through its neck. Its head rolled a few feet in front, while the rest of the body, I just collapsed to the floor. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Chest pounding, riveting, and what a great storyline this is turning out to be. Had to stop this one here, guys. It's actually halfway through this part of the series, as unfortunately I've run out of time to record. But do not fear, I will be back first thing tomorrow with the rest of the story. Of course, as ever, a huge thank you to the Holy Crusader over on Reddit No Sleep. What a marvellous job you've done with writing this, character development, and of course the Cryptid background. All very interesting and exciting stuff. Guys and girls, as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things, why not get in touch with me at the brand new contact email, which is, as on screen, contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week at work or school, or perhaps you're studying. Whatever it is that you do, I hope you're enjoying it and taking a fight back to life. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.